And so that is basically how I scammed my way into an unpaid internship without getting school credit for it. But really, who was really getting scammed? Me. All right, I guess this is a story time. I think I'm gonna need some water. I was an intern at Fashion Magazine in the summer of 2015, which, how is that 5 years ago already? I sort of applied on a whim. I was in my first year of university, coming to the end of winter term, starting to think about what I wanted to do in that coming summer. And I remember I was applying to a lot of serving jobs near my hometown, and I started Googling for magazine internships. As a preteen and teenager, it was always my absolute dream to work at a magazine, and actually specifically Fashion Magazine, which, if you're not familiar, is a Canadian fashion magazine. Just like how it sounds. I had a subscription to that magazine since I was probably 13, and I was just obsessed with it, and I wanted to be a fashion journalist. And when I was in high school, that was like my dream. By the time I got to university, though, I was a little bit more focused on other things like marketing and digital media and stuff like that. But nonetheless, I'd always been passionate about magazines, and I really wanted to work for one. So just sort of out of curiosity, I started Googling for potential magazine internships in Toronto. I found a few, and when I saw that Fashion Magazine hired interns, then I put together this whole application where I designed like a fake magazine spread and put my like writing clips in there and talked about my experience and all that sort of stuff. Then I just emailed it off to the digital editor and thought I would never hear back. But lo and behold, I got an email back probably about a week later asking me to come in for an interview. Like, up until this point, I thought all this was kind of fake. I was just like, oh, I'll try to do it, but I bet I'll never hear back. It'll never actually happen. And then there I was with an interview. So your girl researched hard. I remember Googling everything to do with this. Like, I looked up who the editors were that I would be working under, and I started researching their past work, what their writing was, what they had studied in school. I found out that one of them had a particular interest in fashion history, and so I started looking up stuff about fashion history so that I could talk about that specifically in the interview. Like, I was strategic about this. I bought a whole new outfit from H&M for this interview because I was like, I have to look fashionable. And then Dan, my now husband, then boyfriend, drove me to Toronto for the interview because I was too nervous to drive myself to downtown Toronto. And I remember that I actually sprained my ankle walking out of the building after the interview, but it healed quickly. I remember being really intimidated in the interview, but obviously it went pretty well. In about a week or so, I had an email from them telling me that they wanted to offer me the position of digital editorial intern. So I didn't actually do stuff for the print magazine. I was creating stuff for the website. And when I was making my notes for this video, I looked back on my emails to see the offer email they sent me, and it reminded me of this whole drama within this story, which was in the offer email, they were like, we're so excited to offer you the position of digital editorial intern. I just need you to confirm that you can in fact get school credit for this internship position. Okay, so let's back up for a second. What I didn't mention earlier is that this was an unpaid internship. Not shocking, right? Every magazine ever, all they provide is unpaid internships. There's not a lot of money in the magazine world, as I'm sure you're not surprised. The university that I attended had a co-op program, which I was enrolled in to start in my second year. But the co-op program really only applies to jobs that are paid. That's kind of one of the requirements, is that you're getting paid for the work that you're doing. So this definitely fell outside of what would be considered a co-op job at my school. But I really wanted to do this internship. I didn't care that I wasn't getting paid, and I definitely didn't care that I wasn't getting school credit. I just wanted to have the experience to try it and to put it on my resume. That was totally worth it for me. So I told them that I could get school credit for it, and I was just like, yeah, no problem, this will count towards the cooperative education part of my degree. Sent back the email. They didn't question it. They were like, okay, sure. And I thought that I had, dodged that bullet and it was all going to be okay until I actually got to the internship. And within the first week, they were like, yeah, so we just need like a letter from your school, like confirming that you can get school credit for this. It's just like a technicality, we need this. Which is just them trying to cover their own butt for the fact they've got unpaid labor. But thankfully, I was in kind of a small program as one of my majors at the time. I was doing a double major. It ended up being a minor, but nobody cares about that. Thankfully, I knew the academic advisor, and basically I asked her to write a vague letter saying that I was in the co-op program, which is like, paid internships basically. And that's all the letter really said. It was just vague enough that it seemed like it was a confirmation, even though it wasn't, because I definitely was not getting school credit for that internship. And so that is basically how I scammed my way into an unpaid internship without getting school credit for it. But really, who was really getting scammed? Me. I was scamming myself because I didn't get anything out of this other than the experience and putting it on my resume, which, like I said, that's pretty much what I was doing it for. So I felt like I was a spy on a covert mission trying to convince these people I could get school credit. But honestly, the people I was working under, like the editors, probably did not care at all. They just probably had to prove to HR that their interns, had reason to be there or whatever. So after I got the offer and before I went to start the internship, there was the small matter of telling my parents that I was not coming home for the summer and in fact had been offered an internship at Fashion Magazine in Toronto. Honestly, my mom took it very well and I don't think she was too surprised because I tend to do stuff like this. But when I was 18, I had lived away from home for about 8 months in the dorms at school, but otherwise I did not really have much experience of the wider world. And really the way that I was able to make all of this work at age 18 with no income and, needing to pay for school and all this stuff was that my, again, now husband, boyfriend at the time, his grandma lived in the suburbs of Toronto. And so what we worked out was that I was going to go and live with her. And that is how I would be able to afford to work in Toronto for free. Because for reference, where I grew up is in a small town about 2 hours away from the city. So obviously I was going to need somewhere to stay while I was there. I had a lovely time staying with Dan's grandma. I feel like we formed a good bond during that summer and we would eat dinner together every night. Then we would watch Wheel of Fortune followed by Jeopardy. And then we would play Scrabble. And then I would, retire to my room to watch Netflix or whatever before going to bed. And that was pretty much my daily routine as an intern at Fashion Magazine. So glamorous, right? But I was also so young. I was just living a very different life than the other people I was working with. Which brings me to where the struggle starts to happen and the conflict of this story. I was a lot younger than my coworkers, which I don't think they necessarily realized because I've kind of looked the same since I was in high school. I've always looked a little bit older than I was and I'm tall, so I think I came across as older than 18 because I just remember even them talking about going out to clubs and bars and stuff like that and me being like, I'm literally not even legal drinking age, which is especially surprising in Canada because here you need to be 19 to purchase alcohol. So I was really young then. Honestly, the biggest feeling that I remember from my time of being an intern is just that I was scared all the time. I was just always on edge and always stressed and always feeling like I'm not doing good enough or I'm going to get in trouble or I'm not proving myself or I'm not doing the right thing. I felt very out of place because I was literally a small town girl. I grew up in the country. The only thing I knew about fashion was literally from reading all these magazines over the years. That's how I knew anything about it. It's not like I really had any personal experience. All of my clothes were from, like I mentioned, H&M or whatever random store in the mall. I had heard of Holt Renfrew, but only from those magazines. I had never set foot in one. Really, the entire time I was living in this state of intense imposter syndrome because I felt like I wasn't cool enough, fashionable enough, I didn't know enough about the world. I remember halfway through that internship when my co-intern had to tell me who Gigi Hadid was because I hadn't heard of her. Then again, she was pretty new on the scene back then, but still, I felt out of touch compared to these other people. And honestly, I felt like I got a lot of negative feedback from the editors, which is part of why I was on guard all the time. But I definitely want to give a caveat to that because honestly, I took it so hard. I felt so bad about myself a lot and I really felt like I wasn't doing a good enough job and I didn't, wasn't smart enough, wasn't cool enough, all that stuff. Looking back, I think the thing is I was really hard on myself for one, but I think also I was just really young and I had a lot of learning to do. All the time I felt like they would read my writing and be like, this doesn't really match the voice of our site. You need to get a better sense of what our voice is and, write it in this voice kind of thing. It didn't seem like it matched with what they were creating. And at the time I felt very frustrated by that. I was like, what are you talking about? I feel like this is good. I'm just trying my best. But I know looking back that it wasn't. Like, I did need to learn more so what the voice was. I almost needed to find that more mature, like, urban voice that I didn't really connect with, to be honest. Because I felt like the primary audience we were writing to was probably, like, women in their 30s who live in big cities in Canada, and, like, I had no connection to that life at all. We would also have meetings every morning when we would first get into the office, where we would go and pitch story ideas to the editor. So we would like see stuff online or just have our own inspiration and be like, hey, what do you think of this idea? I want to write an article on this. And then they would either be like, yeah, that sounds great, you should do that. Or they would be like, yeah, no, not really our thing. And I felt like I got a lot of, yeah, not really our thing. And so that was discouraging too. And I, would get so frustrated and feel like, what's going on? I wish I could. I just wanted approval so bad. And I did get some positive feedback sometimes, but I think the fact is at the time I was so in my head and so frustrated and, at all this negative feedback. But like looking back now, it's like, I think it was fair what they were saying, because I did need to find that more mature voice. I did need to understand what the brand of the magazine was, and I needed to figure out what kind of stuff they wanted to be covering with their content. All of this is to say, I felt very, very discouraged at the time, felt like I could never do anything right, and I felt like I was never good enough. But now I think a few years down the line, I realized that I did need to improve. So I don't think that it was unfair. Another thing that I spent a lot of time doing was transcribing interviews for the other journalists. So whether it was like the health editor or so-and-so writing for the magazine, they would do an interview with a famous person of some variety or an expert or whatever, then they would get me to transcribe the audio, so they would have a written version of it. And I remember transcribing an interview with Charlotte Tilbury, who's obviously got a makeup brand, and I remember not being able to understand like half of the stuff she was saying. Like there was so many words where I was like, what is this even saying? Like I didn't know at all. But made it through, just tried my best and transcribed a lot of interviews. I got really fast at typing during that time. Honestly, my fondest memories of this internship were the beauty sale and the shawarma place. So me and my co-intern would have lunch together every day. So I didn't mention this before, but there were two people in the exact same role as me. So myself and another girl were both digital editorial interns. And so we did pretty much everything together. It was really great to have a coworker on the same level as me that I could relate with and be like, what do you think of this? You think this is okay? This is a bad idea? Is this a good idea? And, we could relate about it. It's somebody was on my team is how it felt. But honestly, at the time, I had just finished my first year of university. She had just finished her fourth year and was going back for a fifth year. So we were just in very different places in our lives. So even though we definitely got along as coworkers, we were never going to be like best friends outside of the workplace. Like she was living her life, hot girl summer, Toronto, all that stuff. And I was, watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune every night. So we just had totally different lives. So we were good as coworkers, but we never really became friends. But anyway, I always looked forward to the lunches because it'd be a time for us to just chill and chat about stuff and come up with ideas together, and then also just commiserate about the difficulties of, trying to come up with content that isn't always well received. And she mostly would just have like an apple and peanut butter for lunch every day and then get 3/4 of the way through the apple and be like, I'm full. I loved when I would have my one day a week that I would buy my lunch and I would go to the Shawarma King or Shawarma Palace, I forget what it was called, right down the street, and I would get myself that full flavor shawarma plate, baby, because it was so good. This is back when I was still eating meat, so I don't condone this anymore. But that was actually the last year that I ate meat, so I got my fill of shawarma that summer. And I said sayonara. So that was always a highlight. And that's the part that I look back on fondly because it wasn't stressful. It was just like fun. And my first experience of being in like an office job, like a grown up, and then going out for lunch with your coworker or whatever. I'd never done that before. The other fun part, which is the most iconic part, was the beauty sale. As you can imagine, magazines get lots of products from brands because brands want the editors to try out the products and then write about them and share about them in the magazine. Like it's marketing. That's how it works. So they had a beauty closet that was filled with products that had been released over the past year or so, or 6 months. And, eventually they had to get rid of them because somebody swatched it once and then it's just sitting there and it's kind of a waste to keep it there. So they would have a beauty sale that was open to all the magazine employees. And basically the way it worked was all of these high-end beauty products that had been sent to the magazine and maybe used once or maybe not used at all, you could purchase for $2. Just one Canadian toonie. Iconic, right? So I showed up with like $40 in cash because I was like, no way I'm missing this chance. Oh, and the way it works is they would take the cash and donate it to like a local charity. Like they wouldn't keep that money. It's more a fundraiser than anything, but it was my chance to get most of the high-end makeup that I still own today because I haven't really bought much since then. I got this full-on Kat Von D palette for $2. I got like a bunch of different MAC lipsticks for $2, MAC eyeshadows, all kinds of stuff, y'all. It was worth it just for that, okay? They didn't pay me anything that entire summer, but look at the deals that I got. That felt very cool and exclusive and fun. So that was probably one of my best memories and best flexes on Instagram at the time. But even with the shawarma once a week and the beauty sale, overall it was kind of a negative experience for me, to be honest. And I don't want to blame that on anyone. Like, it's not that the magazine itself was a bad place to work for at all. Like, it wasn't the people that I was working with. Like, they were fine. I think it was just, I was so young and I felt so out of place and just imposter syndrome to the max the entire time. At the end of the day, mostly I think I was lonely. I was living with Dan's grandma, which, don't get me wrong, I love her. But, I didn't have a lot of social contact with people that I felt that I could really relate to. And I missed my family a lot. I had gone from living with them, obviously, as a teenager, to living in a dorm for the first 8 months of university, where I was surrounded by people all the time, and I loved that. And then all of a sudden, my world just like really shrunk, and I felt like I hardly got to see people. So I was feeling very lonely and very much like I wanted to go home. That paired with my constant discouragement. Do people really say that? That paired with me feeling constantly discouraged that I wasn't doing good enough work. I just was like, I want to quit. Like, I really wanted to go home. I feel like now, it doesn't seem rational now. It doesn't seem logical now at all. But literally, I had typed out like a resignation email on my notes app on my phone. And I was like ready to send it and never go back again because I don't know. Like, I think also at this time, it was starting to dawn on me the struggle of what it would be like to work for somebody else for your whole life. Like, I remember talking to Dan and being like, I don't think I can do this forever. Like, this is what adulthood is like. This is what the future of my entire life is like, is reporting to people that I'm totally scared shitless of and feeling intimidated and like I'm an imposter all the time and never being good enough. Like, I don't think I can live like that. And so obviously I was getting very existential about it because I thought that's what being in the workplace was just like. But in reality, I think it was just what an 18-year-old who was totally outside of her depth, would experience in the workplace. But I also think it was the beginnings of me feeling like maybe entrepreneurship was something I'd be more interested in, which obviously it was, because here we are. But I think that I was extrapolating my one small experience of this one workplace into what everything would be like. And, I was just very young and lonely and discouraged and scared. Like, all the time, I was so scared. Even though there was times where I felt so ready to quit, Dan convinced me to keep going. He's like, you can't quit. You just have to finish it. You only have 10 more weeks, 9 more weeks. And I did make my way through it, and I'm so glad that I did, because I don't know how much it's helped me actually in my career, because now I just do stuff for the internet, but it was a very good experience. I'm glad that I knew what the world of being a magazine intern was like, because I spent all my teenage years wanting to work at this magazine, and I did get to experience that. And I think figuring out the kind of work that you want to do is just as much about figuring out what you don't like as what you do like. So definitely a valuable experience that I wouldn't want to trade. So I'm glad that I stuck it out to the very end. Though I think throughout the time, I got a little bit more and more disenchanted with the fashion industry, and I realized that I wasn't really as passionate about it as I was before. Like, I think what I was really passionate about when I dreamed about being an intern at a fashion magazine wasn't about writing on fashion. It was about the idea of creating content for the sake of creating content, like making fun editorial stuff that other people will read and enjoy. And that, is the same thing about a blog or a YouTube channel or basically now Instagram. So I think it was just me being a content creator, and that's that's how I knew a way of doing it professionally. So throughout the course of the summer, I became more and more disinterested with the fashion industry, and actually the following year in 2016 was a year where I didn't buy a single piece of new clothing. I told myself in 2016, I'm only going to buy secondhand, I'm not going to buy anything new. I followed through with that. That summer was also the most granola-ass period in my entire life, but that's a story for another video, I think. That's the summer where I barely wore a bra and tried washing my hair with apple cider vinegar, so. 180 from the fashion magazine summer, that is for sure. But my time at fashion magazine is also when I started wearing red lipstick every day. I stopped, obviously, for a period in 2016, but that is when I, started incorporating that into my brand. So back to the internship. The last day is probably one of the most memorable ones for me, because I remember we went out to eat together, and they gave us both a thank you gift, which felt hella luxurious because it was full of high-end stuff that had been sent to the editors to try out, and obviously they didn't want them, so they just gave it to us as a thank you gift. So again, I got some eyeshadow palettes and stuff like that. And honestly, it was the first time where I really felt super appreciated, and I wasn't a total idiot and disaster at my job, because they were like, oh, we love the beauty articles you wrote. You did such a good job with this and that. So I was like, oh, thank you so much. I felt I felt a little bit better about myself after that. And then I headed home and never went back to fashion magazine again, which is just fine, probably for all parties. I learned a lot in that internship, I think, about myself and about the kind of work that I wanted to do. Honestly, for a long time, looking back at it, it has felt like a negative experience to me. I've always associated with feeling down, feeling discouraged, feeling really lonely. And I think actually through making this video, I've realized that it wasn't really the internship's fault. There was a lot of other factors that were going on. It wasn't really a good experience overall at the time. I think now I can look back and be like, I'm glad that I did it. But at the time, I was sad and discouraged most days. And that experience, paired with another summer I spent in Toronto where I was mostly lonely, have made me never ever want to live there again. I just associate that city with loneliness. Even though my internship at Fashion Magazine is mostly a cool party story now, I am glad that I did it. I think that it taught me a lot at the time. It taught me that I can make it through difficult things, that I can learn stuff, that I can do stuff that is scary and intimidating and make it through to the other end. This has been a really long video talking about a story in my life. So maybe there weren't very many dramatic moments in this story, but I thought it might be worth telling anyway because, I don't know, it was a pretty pivotal moment in my life and it's kind of a cool anecdote. So I know this was a very different video than I normally make, but if you like this more personal kind of stuff, then you'll probably like this video I made about a day in my life of running an online business. I worked really hard on that video and I would honestly love for you to watch it. So go ahead and just click on that next. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, go click on that. I will see you in that video. Okay, bye.